vice president of First Union National Bank, based here in Nashville. These two gregarious men happened to be traveling to St. Paul, Minnesota. And Mr. Glenn invited me to visit him, gave my dad his card, and said, tell Leslie to come see me at the bank. And soon I moved my paltry little accounts over to First Union. And that's where I met Al on the main floor of the First Union Bank at that time. We were both young. And I say paltry, I mean paltry. But it didn't matter to Mr. Glenn. It was all about relationships.
That's for sure.
Soon after, Al found himself the first real treasurer of the Health Adventure. I know many of you remember the Health Adventure, which unfortunately is not with us today. And so he became the treasurer of the first board, and I was on that board. And we worked hard to strengthen this fledgling, but very innovative and creative organization. From there, we collaborated on numerous community endeavors over all these years. I know Al to be a gifted community leader with an awe-inspiring life. One reason for this, I believe, is that he seamlessly moves among and between different sectors of our community and the region, and is respected across all of them due to his values, to his personality, and to his values, his personality, and his quiet contributions, such as his years tutoring teen boys of color, or cultivating banking relationships across all social groups and strata, or taking on complex community endeavors, such as nonprofits in crisis with the IRS, the more than one, the education achievement gap, the Asheville City Schools, of course, or Buncombe County government corruption that erupted right after Al took office. We're not involved in any of that, but first meeting just about, wasn't it, Al? Looked at the budget, and Al said, we got a problem. Al, we're so grateful to you for your faithful life well lived and for your presence with us here at St. John's tonight. He's going to regale us with some stories and some insights, and then we'll have a chance for questions and conversation. Thanks so much, Al.
I'll do like I did Monday. I was at Evergreen School, and I met with 2 fourth grade classes. And one of the young men told me before, I started, he said, now, we got a seat up there for you. He said, I know you're the same age as my grandpa. What's the saying? Kids will tell you the truth. I couldn't say anything, and I told him, I said, well, I'm going to try. And at the end, when I said, he said, you made it. And then asked me for my autograph. I didn't quite know what to do. But I've always enjoyed young people because, that's what I say keeps you young. And it's on the Board of Commissioners. What's interesting is 7 of us. The other 6 all are younger than my older daughter. But we get along fine. But it's always, when Leslie called, now Leslie is better than Shirley, my wife. Because what Shirley would do is say, Al, I committed you to this, you need to be there Friday at 8 o'clock or something, and don't be late now, because you represent me. But Leslie calls, she said, Al, I wonder if you would like to, when she knows I'm not gonna turn her down. But it's great to be here with you all, because, I have fond memories of the whole Hall Creek area in East Asheville. Because back in the 70s, that was my first branch, really, when I was branch manager. At that time, we were the only branch going east until you get to Manning. So I was in Fairview, I had all of Buncombe County, East Buncombe County, with Fairview, Swananoa, Black Mountain, and all. And I didn't realize until I became a county commissioner that people don't forget you. I had that area, and they were telling me, you're gonna have trouble being elected there. And I didn't say anything, another advantage. But what I'm gonna talk to you tonight about, I hope I can hold your attention, is about a kid born here November 25th, 1944. Thank goodness I had good parents, because they prepared me for a life that I didn't know I could have coming up in Asheville. Because they taught me how to live in two worlds, one black and one white. But one of the things they always taught us, both boys, is to respect everybody and treat them like you would like to be treated, unless the other way around, because my mom is pretty fiery, she can be but thank goodness for them, because today, both of us have had good lives and done well. And, my dad went to the 8th grade, but he saw, before he died at 88, both boys with degrees and all of his grandkids. And one thing that he stressed, not one of us had loans. And that really, my daughters really like that, because I didn't say I didn't have them, but they did. But what I'm gonna talk about, I was born, to show you how things change, in the colored hospital. And for those of you who've been around a while, it was where Jesse Ray's funeral home used to be, at the corner of South Side and Dipple Avenue. And, we had then, it was almost like two cities in one. One was black and the other was white. We had Eagle Street, that was the business district for, the African Americans in Asheville, and we had everything there. Barber shops, restaurants, two insurance companies, Winston Mutual out of Winston-Salem and North Carolina Mutual out of Durham, and both were black insurance companies at the time. And we had lawyers there, we even had one insurance broker. So, that was it. And not to mention, it was anchored by the Wildlife Culture Center. And in those days, that was really the hub for the community. That's where all the social action went on. That's where they had a lot of the galas and all. That was the place to be. So this was sort of the Asheville that I came up in. And you had the different sections. You had East End, South Side. Shiloh then was not in the city. It was in the county. As a matter of fact, that's where my dad was from. And when we go out there to visit our relatives, it was like going to Charlotte or something. Yeah. But where I came up was an area they called Stumptown. It was over off Pearson Drive in the Martha area. And I came up on Gray Street, and then you had Morrow, James, Gay. You had several streets over there. But what was interesting at the time as a little boy, that I didn't understand, because on the street I came up on, it was paved. but the rest of the streets over there then were dirt streets. And something else I didn't understand, I was maybe 7 or 8, is that while all the ladies who lived on the street, they were domestic workers, and they all had white chauffeurs. What I mean by that, when the people, they work late at night, and the families they work for, the men would drive them home, but they would be sitting in the back. So, I just saw the chauffeurs. I didn't know. But I found out in later years, the reason our street was paved is because a lot of the ladies on the street worked for the most prominent families in the area. And they didn't like driving their nice cars on the dirt road. So 3 of them were on city council, and back in the 30s and sometimes they decided to pave the street, and that was it. But one thing about Gray Street and coming up there, all of the moms on that street, at one time or another, they had a piece of my behind. What they would do, Mrs. Waters, Mrs. Knox, they were all like Mom, and you would hope whatever they would catch us doing, they wouldn't tell your parents. But it always managed to lead us home. So. But they taught us, and they stayed behind us, but they also supported us in whatever we did. And boy, none of us don't even try staying out of school. Because we had a couple of boys, their parents worked, and they would try to stay out of school. Those ladies would go get them and carry them to school. They didn't, and you couldn't say you can't bother me because Mom or Dad didn't tell you. It didn't work. And we all knew we had to respect it. And that's how we came up, and it paid off. Not to mention that we all were in church. On the week before I had to go to church more, I'll tell you, more than that. If I never go to church another day in my life, I've been more than most people. But, the good thing about it, though, that gave all of us a moral compass. Because we learned so much. And, people asked me, said, you seem comfortable when you speak in the crowd. Did you have good speech teachers in college? Well, yeah, I did. But I learned it in Hopkins Chapel Church, right over here by the TVA, because we had a lot of teachers who were members of our church. They taught us in Sunday school. And when we'd have pageants or whatever, things, not like today, some are turned over in their graves. When we have something, I see kids reading their part from a piece of paper. No, we had to memorize it. And unfortunately, my mom was the one directing a lot of that stuff. So Kenneth and I, we had to, in most cases, learn all the parts. So if somebody didn't show up, one of us could fill in. But yeah, that was it. Yeah, we had to. But that was the part that we came up in. My mom was always at home though with us because Dad worked 3 jobs and he didn't want her. He wanted her there with us. We had 3 meals every day. She was waiting on us to do our homework and all. And that's what she never worked until we were in high school. And what really started the ball rolling for me, and when I started really paying attention to what was going on in the community, is when I started the school in 1950. Well, I ended up in St. Anthony's, which was an all-black Catholic school, 1st through the 8th grade. It's still there on Walton Street, the building, and all Irish teachers, most of them from upstate New York. And they were tough as nails, we thought. But what in later years, and the older I get, they had high expectations. And they made sure they didn't tell us that you're black or second-class citizen. No. They pushed us. and something that stuck, never went away. But once I started doing it, the reason I ended up at St. Anthony's, my birthday is November 25th. Public school, I would have had to stay at home another year. And Mom said if that had happened, she would have been minus or so.
I know that feeling.
I think I was into too much. I was giving it. But once I started the school, we didn't have school buses. They did out in the county. But in the city, we rode city buses. They gave in the time brown bus tickets. So when I started riding the bus, we had to go to the back of the bus. Well, I remember one day, Freddie Waters, a friend of mine, we were in the same class at St. Anthony's. He looked at me, we were waiting on Margaret to catch the bus. He said, "We're going to sit up front." I said, "Right, we're not going to back." So we sat up front, and who happened to be on the bus? The policeman was riding. He said, "You boys know what you're doing?" And I said, "Yes, sir, we're riding the bus." He said, "You ride the bus in the back. You don't sit in the front." And right then and there, I told Freddie when we went to the back of the army, I said, "Someday we're going to have to change this." I didn't realize what was coming either. But going to St. Anthony's, that really taught me a lot. Because in the 7th grade, we were taking algebra. And we were probably ahead of the public schools at that time. And I remember a friend of mine made 78 on the algebra test. And I did too. She told Dawn, she said, "Dawn, good student, fine." She said, "Alfred Whitesides, you tell your parents you'll be staying after school tomorrow and take the test over." Well, I knew better than to challenge her in front of the class. And I waited until after the class. I said, "Sister Mary Helen Therese." I said, "Sister, why have I got Donald made 78? And he did a good job. Why do I have to take the test over?" She said, "He's doing the best he can. But you can do better." And sure enough, I took it over, and it wasn't the same test either. It didn't work that way. I looked up and somehow made 88, I think. She said, "That's more like what I expected out of it." But now this is not the funny part, though. The laugh is really on her. I ended up a banker, and Don was a physician. Don was one of these guys, you've seen people who they're gonna do enough to get by, everybody can fall for it. But that was the interview, and when we graduated from St. Anthony's, I have pictures today, we had cap and gown and all. And it surprised all of us. We had valedictorian, salutatorian, and all. And we had to give, I was a valedictorian, and I had to write, that was my first speech. With Mom and Dad and everybody. And of course, the sisters helped us with it. But, that was the start. And then from there, I went to Stevens Lee High School that you've heard about. All black high school, which was unreal because the teachers there were some of the best you could have. All of our teachers, I didn't know this for years later on the school board, but in the 40s, Stevens Lee had, percentage-wise, more teachers with master's degrees than any high school in North Carolina, black or white. And what was interesting too, I found out in later years, most of them got their masters in the summer from places like IU, Indiana University, and an English teacher, Ms. Harrison from Columbia, was her master's. Michigan State was all, big schools. None of them were from North Carolina schools. But you know who paid for them to get their master's in the school? The state of North Carolina.
I'll be doing.
And even paid their way up and back and gave them a stipend. They did that to keep them out of Chapel Hill, State and all. That's the time we were living in. But when you think about it, they never failed. All of them, they were top notch. But one of the things that as a student, when I went there, I didn't like, our books were used. They were from Lee Edwards, Whitesides. A lot that we had was just handed down. We didn't like that. So, and by the way, the books that I got, they didn't highlight it then. They would try to underline the answers. Some reason, I always got the dumbest books. I still had to do the work. But about my 10th grade year, a group of upper class got together, 5 boys. And they were complaining about Stevens Lee was run down, we needed some work done. We didn't like getting the used books and all. And what they did is went to the PTA, got the parents on board, and then went to the school board meeting. So as a result of what we started there, in 1965, they built a brand new Stevens Lee. But in doing this is where A-score started. Because they don't talk a lot about that. But what happened was, you would begin to have the sit-ins all over. We didn't have an HBCU, or historically black college, in Ashland. So high school students, and we knew that whatever we did had to be nonviolent. So we got Mr. Will Rowland, who was a jeweler here. He was our advisor, and he got some of the preachers and some of the family members. And this went on over about a 5-year period. Now, mind you, a lot of the parents, they were afraid. They didn't want their kids doing that. But my parents, the only thing they always said, you do it, if your grades drop, you come out. Because don't forget why you're in school to get an education. And they stayed on that, beat them through college. But what we did, we through Mr. Rowland, he knew a friend in High Point, and it was a Quaker community there, a Quaker church. They came up, 2 of the ministers, and taught us nonviolence. At first, they gave us a little book from Gandhi, and then they made maybe 5 trips up.
Wow.
And they carried us through what we would have to go through. And it was great, the training they gave us. And then we figured out, though, from then, that we couldn't get all the students in A school. We didn't want some, because we knew some were not disciplined enough. Well, we found that, we didn't say it that way then. We said we didn't want the people who were gonna cause problems, and we knew. And it ended up, most of our members went on to college because we were picky. We got the good students, and we knew they were the ones, and it worked. And over that 5-year period, we had about 250 kids. And we started it with the Pack Memorial Library. And if any of you remember, that was right there, Pack Square, where the Art Museum is now. They had the colored library was in the YMI building. It was in a room really about half the size of this room, with a few books and periodicals there. Now remember, you could hit the library with the rock almost where we were. But if we ordered a book in the library, it took 5 days to get it.
Half a block.
So we said, nah. So once we organized, we thought that would be the first place to start. And we did. So as students, we went up and met with the head of the library. Thanks to our principal, he got us a meeting, and we explained to them that, it wasn't fair for them we were very diplomatic. They have to walk books over to us when we can come to eat, why do you need two? You don't need two libraries, you can do it with one, here. But here's what we did. Now, when we actually walked the picket line, it was all boys. But when we went to negotiate, you'll love this, Leslie, it was 2 girls and a boy. But that's how we started. It took us, really, we broke it down in less than a month. It's a lot.
Wow.
That changed easy. From there, we went to the movie theaters, where we had to sit in a balcony, and since the Imperial didn't have a balcony, we couldn't even go in there. But once we broke them down, I remember the first time I went to the Imperial Theater, I said, this raggedy place, I'm not coming back. Keep me out of this. But the theater, and then the lunch counters, we would Crest and Woolworth, and we did that. And what we did at Woolworth, we had the support of whites in the community, adults. And we would go into Woolworth and sit down, and we would leave a seat between us. And then in would come the adults and sit there. Well, this happened about twice, and finally, they did service there at Crest. But because before then, you'd walk up to the end of the line, they would sell you your food, and then you'd have to leave. You couldn't eat it there. In some of the restaurants, you had to go to the back door. But my parents, they wouldn't go to anybody's back door. They didn't bring us up that way, but that's the way it was. So we got to the A&P and Winn-Dixie stores. You remember that? Okay, we couldn't figure out why we couldn't at least be bag boys. That. So we boycotted them. And this went on for maybe 6 weeks. And as a result of that, though, that's what really took me out of this. I couldn't meet with them as much because I was one of the first ones they hired. And when they did A&P, which was there on Belleville Avenue at the time, where the demo place is now. And I remember they were paying us 97 cents an hour. Yeah. But on Saturday, I'd make $25 in tips, working all day. Oh yeah, we did all right, being nice to people, they would take care of us. But that's when I would attend meetings because I ended up working on Thursday afternoon, Friday after school, and then all day Saturday. And I did that my junior and senior year in high school. That's when I worked, for A&P. And then some when I went to college in Durham. I worked after I got to Durham. I worked, with A&P. And when time came to graduate from Stevens Lee, I knew I had to go to college. I didn't have a choice. I couldn't come back to ask for mom and dad, no. And all of the church members at Hopkins Chapel, they wouldn't, they kept saying, when you go to college. They didn't say if, that was it. And I remember the summer, it's been the end of July, it was 2 of us in our church who graduated from high school that year, and we were going to college. They took up an offer and raised $2,600. And they split it between the 2 of us. And that $1,300 paid for mine. Well, I think Dad and Mom put $200 with it. No, they didn't. I did because I had the money I'd saved from A&P. But that took care of my freshman year at Morehouse in Atlanta. And I went there for 2 years before coming back to North Carolina. And the reason I didn't like it, it was a good school, but it was all male. and another thing there was my great uncle, Mom's uncle, who was from Uncle Thomas Kilgore, who was from Brevard. He worked his way through Morehouse. And he stayed with a Baptist minister, Baptist minister and his family. Well, when I got there as a freshman, I remember he told me before he was in Asheville summer, said, now you got to go to Ebenezer. And when you go there, see Mrs. King, tell her who you are, and she'll know who I am. That was Martin Luther King Jr.'s mom. And by the way, that was the family he stayed with most of the time. And he would keep Martin Jr., his brother and sister, when the family would go out of town. Well, it was about November. I hadn't been to church, I hadn't been in, I didn't go. Mom called me from home, and that's back then when you get a call, something's wrong. Well, she said, you need to go be at West Hunter Street Baptist Church Sunday. And Uncle Thomas is preaching there, and and it was the Sunday after my birthday, it was in November. And we didn't get to go home for Thanksgiving because we had one day off, and I had 8 o'clock class that Friday and that Saturday, we go a half a day. But I did. I got up and went to church that Sunday, and the pastor there was a fellow, young man, Ralph Abernathy.
Oh, boy.
Who later became one of King Gavin. And I go to church, and I'm sitting down, and after church, they were going to take me out to lunch, give me some good food, which I was looking forward to. And this young man walked in the back of the church, well dressed. And I was standing there waiting. He walked over to me. He said, you must be the Kilgore boy. And I said, no, I'm Whitesides. I said, but you're right. My mom was a Kilgore. He said, I'm Martin Luther King Jr. No, he said, I'm Martin King. I'm sorry. And we shook hands. And I said, well, it's nice to meet you. He said, look, next Sunday, you be at Ebenezer. Or my mom told me to tell you that she would come to Graves Hall and get me. And sure enough, that started a good relationship because what I did, that Sunday I went to Ebenezer and they had these tall ushers, big, and I had to fill out the signature card, not the signature, visitor's card. And the guy said, you're the Whitesides boy. I said, yeah. He said, you don't look like your name. And he grabbed me by the arm. Karen was in the old Ebenezer, right down the center aisle, and sitting me right on the end, about 3 seats back. And he said, you don't move until after church. Mama King will come and get you.
Yep.
I was afraid to even go to the bathroom. That was it. So after the church, she came over, and at that time, they would feed us on Sunday for, dinner, lunch, and give us a bag for that night. And I know if I missed that, I'd be in trouble. So she came back, because when I first sat down, she was playing the organ, just before church started, looked around and smiled. And I knew that she was organist. I knew who she was just from what I heard. After church, she came out, she had a robe and on her arm, and they lived next door to the church. And then she had some books, and she said, put one over my shoulder and gave me the books, and I hold that baby. She put on a coat, and I said, well, it's nice to meet you, but I've got to get back. I miss my meal, and I'll be. She said, you don't want my cooking? And I said, Yes, ma'am. I do. So I went to, and I'll tell you, she was a good cook. After that Sunday, I didn't miss many Sundays. I enjoyed that. And I met him, to Martin Luther Jr., and, the family then, they were just as down to earth as anybody. And to talk to him one-on-one was just a regular guy. In some ways, he was boring because he taught philosophy. He taught a philosophy course in Morehouse, but when you put him in front of 1,000 people or more, he was a different person. And he was one of a kind to talk. And I remember he told me once we were talking, he said, you'll be fighting this battle all your life. He said, I won't be around as long as you guys, but you'll have to, and he always, that's what really got me with him, because he always talked that way. Like It was like he didn't know, he knew at 39 years old, you would think, when you look back, he wouldn't be one. But he was determined, you know. And that relationship was great. And then when I left Morehouse, that's where I started the first boycotts and all that. But when I left and came back to North Carolina, I went down to North Carolina College, where a lot of the members of the family go, where I wanted to go anyway. Now it's North Carolina Central. And boy, when I got down there, the girls outnumbered the boys. 5-1.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was unreal. But what did I do? Start dating a young lady who had 2 sisters on campus too. And I'm still dating, almost 60 years. Yeah. 2 daughters here we have. But through that, down there is where I really got into boycotting. I was arrested 14 times there and in Atlanta. And my senior year, when I was president of the student government at North Carolina College, that was really a different time for me because we had all kinds of SNCC, Black Panther Party, we had all these merging, you know, and every merging, and everybody wanted to be the leader. You know, everybody wanted to take him. And as president of the student government, we were pretty well organized. And I remember the Black Panthers had problems with me because they wanted to tell me what to do. As president of the student government, anybody know me, know that wouldn't work. And I remember we met at St. Joseph's Church, and they had planned to just take over the meeting, take it away. But they made a mistake. They let us know they were coming, so we were ready. We had the church back. But it was there, though, that I met friends at Duke, Carolina State, Shaw, all of us, because we would come together to help each other boycott. And we would go to 5 Points in Durham, and we'd get there every day about 6 o'clock to boycott and do it. And you know why we go every day at 6 o'clock? We'd be live on national news. Yeah, we knew what, you know, we knew. And that was really a big part of really where I became real active in North Carolina Central College. And through that, during that time, to dodge the draft, I ended up in the Naval Reserve. And I was in the Naval Reserve with the group of guys from Duke.
Oh.
And one of them's mom was the highest ranking woman at the time in the Defense Department. Now, mind you, back then, she was probably over the secretary of who, I don't know, but she was. And as a result of that, I made some lifelong friends there. And all of us had to do active duty. But thanks to her, I only spent 22 months on active duty. Right? But I did make 1 tour of the Vietnam and all. And that's where I really learned how to work with people, really, in the Navy, with all kinds. Because I had some, it was a different environment. And they didn't like me because they didn't care for anybody that had a college degree. And then the officers didn't like it because I went in the E6. I turned down the commission because I didn't want to ride a ship, you know, for all my life. And I just got married not long before. I said, no, I didn't want that. But I made the best of it. And by that, I was a quartermaster in the Navy in E6. And I would work on the bridge on navigation, in which I enjoyed that. It was nice. But then there too, I made lifelong friends. Matter of fact, 2 I lost in the last 18 months. One in St. Louis and another in Oklahoma City. And by the way, on that ship, there was 400 men, and only 25 of us was east of the Mississippi. Everybody else was, because we were home ported in Long Beach, and everybody else was west of the Mississippi. Yeah. And one of my good friends, Birchmount, his family has a small ranch in Montana. He told me it was small. When I went out there, it was 10,000. It's huge. And that was it. And after the Navy, though, that's when really I returned to Asheville. I was headed to law school. You keep me up with the time. Okay, I was headed to law school, but I knew I had to work for some time to save money, because Mom and Dad, I didn't want them to have to pay for law school. They're taking care of college most of it. So I came back and I was home on leave from the Navy, and Dad said, Jim Glenn wants to talk to you at the bank. And see, Dad started as a janitor at First Union. But at that time, he had moved over to Asheville Savings, and he was over purchasing and buildings and all that. But he said, and he knew Mr. Glenn. He said, Jim would like to meet with you. So I went by and met with him. And he said, I'd like for you on the way back. He changed my flight so I could go back to Charlotte, stay there, and then on back to LA. And he said, I want you to talk to some of my buddies in Charlotte. He said, we'd like for you to work for us. But what I didn't know is that Mr. Glenn was so well thought of that he had already told him to hire. That's the way he worked. And I go down, and at that time, it was not easy for guys coming out of the Navy looking for jobs. And so we were leaving on the way to Westpac. It was 6 months. And it didn't last that long because I got cut through that. But I got a letter from First Union with a check for my expenses. I didn't spend anything, and offered me a job when I get out of the Navy. Said, just contact us a few months before we're ready. So I got out in April of 1971. Just in time, I surprised Shirley. She didn't know I was going, because she was finishing college. I was back for her graduation in May. And then the 14th of June, we started. I came back to Asheville. I started the first year in the management training program. And that was interesting because I'd come up around the bank when Dad was a janitor. So most of the people there knew me. And Jim Glenn was smart. He was I tell him in some ways he was a con man. He knew he wanted to get somebody to break the ice to start. And he knew that all of them had known me from a little boy, and I didn't even think about that. And that it would be easier for me than a lot of others. And I remember the two trainees that came back to Asheville with me, both white. They would tell me when we finished our training in Charlotte, Al, we have you back. Don't worry, we know what you'll be going through. So we get here, and back then we had to go through everything. We were bankers, we weren't specialists in no things. But we were in the service center, and they were showing us how they paid checks. We didn't care about that, we didn't know. And Miss Clark, I'll never forget it, we call her behind the back, Sarge Clark. She was and she told us, I know you boys think you're going to be president of the bank someday and all, but don't interrupt me when I'm talking. I don't like that. And I'll tell you when you can ask me questions. So Joe Johnson, I always remember, we laugh about it today when I see him. He lives up in Jefferson. Joe said, well, Miss Clark, she said, is something wrong with your hearing, young man? Didn't I tell you to be quiet and just wait? He said, yes, ma'am. So about 5 minutes later, she was talking about something. And I said, Miss Clark, I don't quite understand what, she said, well, baby, this is it. She explained everything to me. And Joe, being wise as he was, Joe said, well, Miss Clark, you answered Al's question. You talked to him and explained it to him. She said, he's one of us, you not. So from then on, Joe and Bob Kirkman, they told me, they said, now you got our back. But that was really the beginning of a career, because I had not planned to stay in banking. But when I came up, I didn't know I could have a career in banking. So about the time it was time for me to think about going back to law school, and Mom and Dad didn't want me to leave in Asheville because we had the one daughter living there the second. But at that time, you know, I started thinking about it. Well, yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm doing and all. But what changed the whole thing for me when I was promoted to vice president in the mid-70s. And that's when I decided, you know, maybe I can make a career. But now the funny part about this, and Jim Glenn told this story when he retired. Back at that time, if you got title, that was it. No money with it. So he carried me up to the old city club, and he bragged, pulled the letter out when they had made me vice president. He said, you know, it's great, Alfred, I'm proud of you. He always called me Alfred, my whole name. And he said, proud. And I looked at him and I said, this is great, Mr. Glenn, but I can't eat the title. I said, I got Shirley and the two girls. So he looked at me and he told me, he said, yeah, I'll give you $100 a month. Well, back then, I said, I said, okay, great. But what he told in retirement, he said, you changed everything. I had to go call them in Charlotte and get it approved. You know? But that was really the beginning of, you know, my banking career, and which ended up really good. You know, I did it for another 35 years with First Union in Wachovia, and then 5 years I worked for. After I retired, they talked me into coming with a local bank, Mountain First. And then December 31st of 10, I walked out. I said, this is it. It's time for me to stop. And I'm so glad, because I spent 5 years with Mom and Dad. And I lost Dad in 13 and Mom in 16. But I was there with them. I'd go to have lunch with them daily. I could carry them to doctor's appointments and all. So things worked out for the best. But during the time, though, of my career in banking, that's when I really, back then, as bankers, we got our business through working in the community. It was relationships. And that's one thing Mr. Glenn taught us. He believed in relationships. So Leslie and I went with the health adventure together. And by the way, Mr. Glenn was the first treasurer. He was getting ready to retire. I go to the meeting. He said, you're taking my place out. I didn't know what it was, treasurer. I get in the meeting and they put a shoebox in front of me with receipts. And Dole Conroy, she had held over and said, oh my, what are you treasurer? I said, what? And that was the experience. But when I got off and I left the board, we had a full-time person working in finances, and we were getting audits. We were doing what we had to do. But boy, that was some work, but I enjoyed it. And it was different groups, where it was Salvation Army, Weimar Culture Center Board, it was the different boards. But through that, I really began to know the community and to meet people in all areas of the community. And we met on the Boys Club. Yeah.
Sometime in the 70s.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I was only 2.
I found a newspaper. I found the newspaper article, it was in the paper when we were officers, yeah, we all, but it was through that, that's where I really started working in the community. And also, I made it a point to work with different kids in the community, especially the black boys, because I ran into a lot of boys from single parent homes, and I worked with them. And one of those boys that I worked with, they told me he was headed to prison. He was the first African American kid to be valedictorian of his class
Oh.
at Irwin High School. From Irwin, he went to Columbia University.
Oh.
Graduated with honors. But he needed, what was it, $5,000 to get to New York. And guys in my fraternity, we have a foundation. So we knew that we would come up and we did with $2,500, they would give us a check for the rest. We did and got it. And he asked us after it was over, he said, how do I pay you back? And I told him, I said, no, it doesn't work that way. I said, we help you, you got to help at least two more. And he's done well. He was with Raytheon, the company in Nigeria, but no, since then, he's changed jobs. He's with another company, but doing well. We stay in contact with him and a lot of the boys that I work with, and I still do some with young men even today. But it was through all of that, that I really became active, and thanks to my parents, because they taught us that you've got to give back and don't forget where you come from. And also, it helped them. I was speaking since then, once I became a commissioner, up in Barnesville. And it was about 150 people. But at that time, I was a Democrat, but both of their commissions, the way we were then, were Republican. But they needed one of us to come up to speak to them, Democrat. So I got picked to go up there. It's so funny. I got up to the Big Ivy Community Center. It was about 150 people in there. And was one other lady, African American, Don Locke's wife. And the fella introduced me and he said, well, Al, I hope you don't feel overwhelmed. I said, whatever. And then told me, I got up to speak and I said, Charlie, no, I'm not overwhelmed. I said, it's 150 of you and two of us. We or something like that. For a minute, it was silent. I said, uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Then everybody burst into that. But, and that's, and the way I ended up a commissioner is something I hated. Didn't want to be in. So David Gant was retired. And he said, Al, this is the time, we're over 200 years old, counting. We've never had an African American commission. He said, we can get you appointed. Brown is going to be elected for his last 2 years. He said, you can be elected. I said, well, let me think about it. Shirley, I told her about it. And we were in Europe before the election. We were on the French Riviera drinking wine. And Shirley said, well, good friends of ours. She said, Al, have you thought any more about that commission, doing that? And what, flying back from Barcelona, I realized one thing. I'd been taking care of Mom and Dad, but I was retired. It was just me and Shirley, and I was getting on her last night. She wanted me to go somewhere. So I went back and I told her, yeah, I'll try it. I said, fine. So the rest is history. I was appointed. Then, once I was appointed, several people said, Al, it's great to have you the first, but good luck on being reelected. In 18, when I ran for the first time, the head of the elections committee called me in the morning after everybody registered. She said, Al, have you set up your campaign committee and open account, all that yet? I said, yeah, let me get started. Why are you rushing? She said, no, I'm saving your time. Don't do it. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you don't have anybody running it. I said, sure, I knew nobody would primary, the Democratic side, but surely it's a Republican. She said, nobody's running against you. So that was the most awkward election I've ever been in. I was going around the forum and people were asking me, why are you here? but I made up for it 2 years ago, the last time, because got primary and I was in the general election. But I got, 70%, I did all that.
That's okay.
But that was, the beginning, and as they said, I'll end on this and open questions. My mom always told me, she was very religious. She said, son, sometimes the Lord will put you in a place and you wonder why. Boy, did that ever happen to me in the spring of 17. I became a commissioner in 16, and in 17 is when that unraveled. And boy, none of us thought we'd go through what we had to go through. But the result of it, though, we come out on the other side. Everything is much better. We even we kept our AAA bond rating through all of that. But all the people, 6 people went to prison. So, all out now. But that allowed us to make changes in Buncombe County that might have taken years. We were able to do it at jet speed. And we did. We put more checks and balances in place than we, ever have now. And we were fortunate to get a good county manager who's been very good at helping us. And we're structured, so hopefully we won't have to worry about that. Now, let's open it for questions.
Stevens Lee Hospital.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember that marching band was well known for years and years. They were the hospital, the band, they have
Well, let me tell you a story about that man. I don't know if you remember it. It was about 61, maybe. It might have been around 60. Again, we didn't like it because our band was always the last one before Santa Claus, Stevens Lee Band. So they thought that we weren't, we said, why are you all putting us back? We don't want that. We want our band to be in front. Sure enough, they moved it. And one year to the front of the parade, they were the first band. That was the first time and last time. Because once our band went by, everybody was leaving.
Oh!
They were leaving. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, poor Santa felt lonely. I think. But we moved it back because we were looking at it because we were black, they put us behind. No, that was good. That changed, but and Mr. Leonard, who was our band director, he was great.
And Henry Logan.
Yes, sir.
And he goes to North Carolina. He filled generations of basketball.
Well, he played in the whole ABA with Julius Irvin, Dr. J. I was on the board of trustees in North Carolina Central with Dr. Walker, who was track coach when I was there. He was U.S. Olympic coach in the 70s, track and field. Good man, and he was head of the Olympic Committee when it was in Atlanta. Well, Julius was in the Durham area speaking, and he came by to see Dr. Walker. And when his secretary came in and said, Chancellor Julius Irvin's here, and I said, well, I'll leave, I'll go. And he said, oh, don't you leave, I want you to meet you, Dr. J. So Julius came in, stood up, and I told him I was from Ashland. He asked me if I knew Henry Logan. I said, yeah, he was behind me in high school. 20 minutes later, we got to say something. He spent all that time talking about Henry. He said inch for inch, he was the best basketball player that he'd ever played against. And look, Julius is in the Hall of Fame, one of the great.
Wow.
But yeah, everybody knew Henry Logan. He was one of a kind. And we honored him here last April. And then I'm so glad we did that, because a few months later he died.
I was asked to do my freshman year at Western for some reason. I guess because I was asked
Do you know
to.
what?
He needed tutors, I mean, he had, school needed tutors, but I don't know if I was the best.
Well, let me tell you what was unfortunate. They found out in later years he was dyslexic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when he went to Western Carolina, he was one that fell through the crack, Stephen.
Oh, absolutely.
When he went to Western Carolina, he couldn't read or write. But he was a good basketball player. And he played football too. But he couldn't, and they sent with him Henry Moore. What was it? Henry Moore? Henry Moore. Because Henry was brilliant, but he only stayed 1 year and he moved on to help. But yeah, Henry, that was unfortunate. But in later years, he did. He learned how to read, and he really turned his life around.
Yeah, they did a last year before he died, they did Western Wednesday.
Yeah.
And had Henry and his, one of the guys in his Bible class, and that's really how we learned to read and speak that.
Right. Yeah.
I'm getting a look from the choir, because they got choir practice.
Good.
But let's take one more question and then we'll.
Okay.
Okay, it's more of a story that reinforces what you said. But when the schools got integrated in Texas, they put one black teacher on and Miss Viola was black, African American, and I don't know who the white lady was, but anyway, all of the white parents wanted their kids to go to the white teacher. And all the black kids knew something about Miss Viola Woods. And she, by the time she taught first grade, the kids were reading at third grade level and math at fifth grade level. Well, guess who wanted her the next year? Remarkable woman.
That's amazing.
That was very, yeah.
Al,
Well, I enjoyed it.
even though you reached your quota of church back years ago, I'm glad you came tonight. You came back to church. I'm getting your story. I was sitting there thinking a lot of things while you were talking, but one thing is, I don't believe change happens without us involved.
That's it.
And for change, the change that we've seen in your lifetime, it took people pushing
Oh, yeah.
and fighting for it and making a stand and putting yourself in there. And you've been a person that has been a great agent for change in our community. And I thank you for your leadership and for putting yourself in these places, going to those, organizing and boycotting, those things that you have done. And in some ways you made it seem easy, but I'm sure many times it was not easy. And I thank you for the way.
And what we learned in my generation, we knew that we would have to be the trailblazers. And we'd have to take more than most. Now, when I look at what it's paid off, when I look at what my daughter was doing, my grandsons now graduating from college, I was the first my family to graduate from college, my immediate family. Now we're in the third generation of graduates. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you
I'll
for
come
your
back-
presence.
I'll come back one Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll bring Shirley.
It's been an honor to have you here tonight.
I hope it was working. I hope I didn't bore you.
Then we'll just close with part of the evening prayer. I put a few copies. This is from the New Zealand prayer book.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to start in the middle of page 2. And we read the Song of Simeon. We'll start and we'll read that together, okay? Together. Guide us with O Lord, and guard us with that awake we may watch with Christ, and sleep we may rest in peace. Together. Praise be to God. I have lived to see this day. God's promise is fulfilled, and my duty done. At last you have given me peace, for I have seen with my own eyes the salvation you have prepared for all nations, a light to the world in its darkness, and the glory of your people Israel. Glory be to God, sustaining, redeeming, sanctifying, as it was in the beginning, so now and forever. Amen. Guide us waking, O Lord, and guard us sleeping, that awake we may watch with Christ, and sleep we may rest in peace. And we'll say the version of the Lord's Prayer in the middle of the next page. Eternal Spirit, earth creator, pain bearer, life giver, the source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, who is heaven, the hallowed of your name echoes through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom, sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we eat for today, feed us. In the curse we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, forgive us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. I lie down in peace and take my rest. For it is in God alone I dwell and pray. Let us bless the earth maker, the pain bearer, the life giver. Let us praise God above all forever. And may God's name be praised beyond the farthest star. Glorified and exalted above all forever. Lord, it is night. The night is for stillness. Let us be still in the presence of God. It is night after a long day. What has been done has been done. What has not been done has not been done. Let it be. The night is dark. Let our fears of the darkness of the world and of our own lives rest in you. The night is quiet. Let the quietness of your peace enfold us, all dear to us, all who have no peace. The night heralds the dawn. Let us look expectantly to a new day, new joys, new possibilities. In your name we pray. Amen. O God of love and mercy, grant us with all your people rest and peace. Amen. The divine Spirit dwells within us.
Thanks be to God.
Amen.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Yeah.